Now we have a fireside chat with Rich from Tray, and I believe Rich has a few.
Oh, look at that!
Yeah,
good stuff. Thank you, James. The Benjamin Button of SaaS, as it so appears. Okay, I'll get a little bit about Tray out of the way. I'm Rich Waldron, the co-founder and CEO. There are two other founders at Tray. We started in 2012, so we're very much a overnight success. Oh, gone the wrong way. Good start.
yeah.
So our kind of mission is to empower what we call the automated organization, and that is taking advantage of APIs and the tooling that exists in the world now to drive automation throughout every team in a company. If you take a look at what someone like Amazon is doing, where you do a one-click order, it gets picked by a robot, pushed onto a machine, and sent off to you as a customer, they've heavily sort of leveraged automation to give them a competitive advantage. We see this as the kind of future of how companies are going to be run. How we do this? We have a software as a service, unsurprisingly, platform that enables you to effectively build connectivity between any application that has an API. So that could be private or public. We have a whole load of different programming functions that exist in between, and you can build extremely complex logic like this, which will carry out a series of actions depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. These will often be things like RFP processes or lead scoring models or whatever it is that you're trying to solve in a specific part of a business. You would use our tool to build the information between those different services. Companies that use us are some of the above, and I can go a little bit into that about kind of where we started out and where we've ended up and the sort of companies that we're now starting to serve. So that's enough of sort of my secret pitch to get you all to go on our website. So I'll hand over to James, who I think is going to grill me in some way.
I will try my best. Thank you, Rich. You'll be very excited to know that we have an actual fire. I mean, not like, don't fire alarm, no, but like, yeah, we went to town. So thank you, Rich. I know you just got back from San Francisco on a busy trip, so thank you for being with us. So I guess one thing to kick off, Tray has been around, you said 2012, right?
Yeah.
Talk us through, and just to clarify, like Tray's now doing very well. You've raised what, like 7 and a bit million, I think, in USD.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And you got some amazing customers. How did this start? Like, what was Tray originally, and what's that journey been like from then until now?
Yeah, so we started out much younger and slightly naive, working on an email product. And our idea was that we were significantly more popular at the time. We were getting kind of bombarded with email, and we felt that there'd be a better way to kind of meter it before it hit our inbox. So we built a sort of rules engine that was built into IMAP, and you'd be able to connect to all these different API providers and basically say, when this email comes in and this condition is met on this service, then carry out this action. That was very much our early premise. So we wanted it to effectively feel very seamless. It should sort of alter your email before it hits your client. We didn't want to build a client because that's a pain. And we wanted it so that you could effectively roll out this sort of invisible layer before your email hit your inbox. So that's where we started out. We were on an incubator called Springboard, which got eaten up by Techstars somewhere along the way back when in 2012. We've been working on the product for about a year or so, and we ended up moving to San Francisco and joining the AngelPad cohort. So that was the sort of early start of Tray. Turns out we weren't actually that fussed by email as a service, and we weren't actually getting that many email. So when we were over in San Francisco, we spent most of our time trying to figure out how we were going to grow this product. We'd had a lot of signups, a lot of interest. We were trying to figure out how we were going to scale it and kind of raise some money to build out the team. And I'm a pretty lousy engineer that was much more product focused. Our CTO was fed up with the terrible scripts that I was writing to try and build automation around our product. So it'd be things like, has an investor signed up to this that has ever invested in an infrastructure product in the last 2 years that isn't a competitor? And that would be loop through MailChimp, compare against AngelList, and a series of other kind of trifectas outside of that. Ultimately, to sort of save his own hassle, Ali, my co-founder, basically took the platform that we'd built, made email a module and enabled me to effectively start kind of jabbing together these different services and spinning them up into the architecture we'd already spent time developing. It dawned on us that this was a much more sort of interesting and powerful path that we could go down, because it enabled us to very quickly answer questions about our business, but also carry out the tasks of team members that we hadn't yet hired or couldn't afford to. So that was sort of the early soiree into the automation space. This was sort of 2013. We were living in an apartment in Hayes Valley, which would now probably cost you about $10,000 a month. Back then it was slightly cheaper, and there was a very good kebab shop just around the corner, which made us feel at home. Off the back of that, we felt that this would be a fairly easy project to turn around. Oh, how wrong we were. We'd already been through a pretty laborious process to fund the company. Involved me selling Wellington boots on eBay and doing a delivery run twice a week for 6 months. That got us our first, I guess, 8 months of capital. We'd built a web agency before, which had kind of self-funded us before that point. So we sort of felt the pressure of being in San Francisco. We had this big demo day coming up, and we built a sort of fairly interesting product. Yet we weren't far along enough for this to be of any real interest. Somewhere around that time, we realized that in order for this to be successful, it had to be as flexible and as powerful as possible. So the kind of integrations that we were trying to build needed to be able to handle very large data throughput. You needed to be able to build any kind of connectivity you wanted. The bottleneck couldn't be the services that we didn't support. So from day one, our kind of remit was, this needs to be something that an engineer initially could pick up, and there wouldn't be any restriction on what they'd be able to do that required us to have to do any work. So we were able to get a POC with a bank. Don't ask me how that happened. And we built out a very heavy Salesforce integration on our framework. That got us in front of some VCs, and we were able to raise our first bit of capital, which was $2 million in 2014. We hired out a fairly small engineering team and just focused entirely on product for the best part of a year and a half, which pretty much goes against every bit of startup advice you'll ever be given, which you should be speaking to customers, you should be out going to market. We were product obsessed, and we felt that we had to deliver a platform that could pretty much scale to anything. The knock-on of doing that meant that we'd built up a lot of resilience throughout this process, and we kind of felt fairly indestructible at this point. We'd been close to bankruptcy quite a few times. We'd racked up a fair amount of debt ourselves internally, and we were kind of determined that we'd get to a certain point where this thing could be scalable. So once we built this product out, we, through some great channel partnerships, started to build up an interesting customer base. And we were largely solving integration problems for providers that were trying to sell to third parties. Typically, somebody wants to come and buy Zendesk product and pay them a couple of $100,000 a year. It usually means that a heavy Salesforce integration or something of that ilk needs to be developed. They ended up building that out on our platform and scaling it up. That enabled us to get to market quite quickly. We were able to prove that we could handle the kind of challenges that we knew had existed prior to this. And we raised $5 million in the summer of 2016. This is the point where everything became sort of very interesting, because we now had the weight of having raised almost $8 million on our back, really only being in the market for, I guess, 3 to 6 months, and having invested to date most of our capital into really getting the right product. We hired Chris, who sat in the front row now, who came on board, and the next, I guess, 12 months were pretty extraordinary. We were able to build an interesting kind of go-to-market model. We found our opportunity in the mid-market enterprise space. We did everything in the playbook about kind of pushing upstream, and we were able to finally see this thing get into the hands of the right provider. So I guess the summary is we weren't particularly smart for a very long time, but we stuck at it and kind of figured out what it was going to be to kind of unlock the growth at the right time. And that took the best part of, I guess, 4.5 years.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Slow and steady does win the race.
Amazing. That's a pretty interesting story. I feel like we want to dig into that a bit more. I'm sure people have questions off the back of that alone. But it'd be interesting to hear how your role has changed then, Rich. Like, it's sounds like you were at one point building stuff yourself and doing all that. Do you still find yourself using Tray every day? Like, what does an average day for Tray for Rich look like these days?
Yeah, so
is there such a thing?
It's lucky our CTO isn't here because he'd be giving me daggers right now. Early on, and really through the kind of early majority, I was mainly in a kind of product role. So working very closely with Ali, our CTO, we were, as I said, obsessed on the product side. Dominic, our third co-founder, was the one that was going out and bringing together user groups and getting them in front of us. So really for the best part, until we started hiring a technical team, I was very hands-on on product. That was probably 80-90% of what I was doing. That quickly shifted to fundraising, which then became sort of 70% of my life for the various failed trifectas that we went through. And we probably failed at that pretty significantly 3 times in the first 3 years. I reckon I pitched probably 150 different investors. And we got used to, hey, you're a very smart team, but I don't think this is going to be right for us right now. How that sort of evolved. So one of the talks earlier, I think, did a really great job of talking about constructing a team and building in culture and kind of how why that's so important. And we were very, very focused on the same challenges. I went from being kind of very product oriented to thinking about how we were going to hire in a team and get that culture fit right. As we started to scale up, we looked at opening a San Francisco office, which we did a year or so ago. My co-founder Dominic moved over, and we started to grow that team very quickly. And my I guess role evolved very fast from being down in the trenches working specifically on product to thinking slightly more about the strategic side of what we were doing and how we were going to onboard new people to being almost a full-time recruiter. And now I guess I'm a balance of somewhere between a recruiter and trying to keep everybody happy and on the right map for where we're heading next. So it's definitely been a kind of sharp path for me to go through, and one that I've really enjoyed, especially now we have such a great kind of large team and we're dealing with customers all the time. So it's been fun to start to put my product hat back on and think about where the product's going in the future.
Cool. So 2 offices at the moment, maybe more.
Yeah.
At some point. What's it like having a US and a UK side, and like how does that work? Like, is there conflict? Talk us through the challenges of going from everyone being in nice little cushy London, Shoreditch space to...
Yeah, so London is our engineering hub, and we are obviously all kind of British and Londoners at heart. We recognize the amazing engineering talent that exists here, and we find it a huge competitive advantage that we can onboard people from the local area, get them involved in our project and hopefully provide a really exciting career. What's ultimately happened by having 2 offices is kind of, initially I was a bit nervous about it. How it's played out, I think I'm currently really happy with, because we found your engineering team and your go-to-market team have very different cultures. The way that they approach the work that they need to do, the momentum that needs to be built at certain times. The go-to-market office can be pretty loud, a lot of action going down, people scrabbling around to get deals done or work on specific campaigns, whereas the engineering team is, I guess, has a slightly more steady momentum. It enables us to have a kind of quieter space and work in a slightly different manner. And the cultures of those different teams actually work really well being in independent locations. I think one of the challenges that we have is how we keep the cohesiveness of the company culture itself between the 2. We do a lot of flying back and forth, as Chris will attest to, and making sure that people kind of not just who specifically need to be in a certain area because there's a task at hand, but also for kind of engaging and building out relationships with other team members. Everything you've read about, I guess, remote work plays true here. Jumping on a video call is the absolute most important thing you can do at any one point. Slack is where things get derailed very quickly. The majority of our conversations do happen there, but as soon as it needs it, we jump on a call and get face to face. So it definitely has been a bit of a challenge, but I think how we're set up now is really set us up well for the future.
Amazing. Very interesting. I guess this kind of has already been partly answered, but raising $5 million in your last round, that is a terrifyingly large amount of money for a lot of people in the room, and everyone celebrates it. It's a great, exciting thing, but I think it adds a lot of pressure and so many challenges. And part of that is expanding overseas. But are there any other like major challenges you guys have had? Like what's been keeping you up at night since you've raised that money?
Well, I think probably one of the biggest changes, and actually something that I'm not sure is a particularly popular opinion, is we formed a board. Up until that point, we had a very strong relationship with our investors, but it was slightly more relaxed. The regular cadence of board meetings, the structure that we have, and having the right people in the room helped us bring our own focus. It helped us not get too kind of down in the weeds with our own strategy. And by going through that mechanism of producing a board pack and going through that process every quarter, it gives you a kind of complete outside view of the business from when you're used to usually being kind of sat, in the driving seat and only looking a certain way. So definitely there was a lot of change in the structure of the company and how we were considered. It also puts you on a timeline, right? I think it's a forcing function in terms of, investors invest in you because they want a return. Sure, they like you and they're interested in your product, but ultimately there's a financial gain that comes at the end of it, and you've got to know what you're getting into when you do that. We felt with the kind of product we're building and the path that we're on that venture capital was the right tool for us to accelerate that growth and capitalize on opportunity. But for a team that had been very kind of product oriented for a long time, it really helped bring some of the skills that we hadn't had prior to that to the table and actually drove us in the right direction. So largely, I think for us, it's been a fantastic experience. Ask me again in a year's time, and we'll see if I'm still saying the same thing.
We'll have London sets going now. I promise you, Rich. I'm conscious I don't want to hog all the questioning, so I'm going to ask you one final question and we'll get the other speakers back and we have more of a Q&A and you can fire nice questions at Rich and the other speakers. So one final one, what's next for Trey?
What's next? We'll be doing a lot of growth in our San Francisco office. So our engineering team here is hiring and has a good steady beat to it, but the majority of our go-to-market is happening over in San Francisco, so we'll be growing that team very quickly. The thing for us now is continuing to get out the good message of Trey, getting in front of the right customers, continuing to tell the right stories. We've got some really interesting product functionality coming out, which we hope to announce in the next kind of 2 to 3 months. But largely it's about really shifting our focus to stepping on the gas and getting out to market quicker.
Fantastic. It's like you trained for this, Rich. Great, cool. Thank you, Rich. Do that.